Hi, today I wanted to talk about psychic somatic experiencing. Now, you've probably heard about somatic experiencing before, and psychic somatic experiencing is pretty much the exact same thing, but it is somatic experiencing that is used intentionally and consciously to nurture psychic development. So in somatic experiencing, what we are doing is we are taking someone that has a trauma. I mean, we all have trauma, but we're taking someone that has a trauma and, the symptoms of the trauma manifest physically in the body. They manifest as feelings of anxiety and as depression and, mood swings, things like that. But in the body, they really manifest as tension and pain and internal tremors. And we can have all of these sensations of heaviness and strain. And it is when we remove ourselves from the thoughts and the emotional aspect, when we separate ourselves from kind of like the cognitive way of processing this trauma, and instead we sink into the body, we become very, very deeply embodied. And in that state, we just tune into the sensation and we try and really milk that sensation and understand it. We want to understand every aspect of it. We want to know what it's there for, what it's there to teach us. And in that noticing and allowing that to be there without judgment, without shame, without trying to fix or change it, we allow something miraculous to happen. And that is that we allow the sensation to fully play out. So trauma that is stuck in the body will manifest as sickness and disease and pain and all of these things because the trauma response never had the opportunity to play out. So somatic experiencing allows that to happen. Now, in psychic somatic experiencing, we are taking the same concept, and instead of working with a trauma, we are working with our sense perceptions. We are working with the five senses, because realistically, all that psychic awareness is an extension of our material senses. So we have sight, we have taste, we have touch or feeling, we have our hearing, we have our smell, all of these different things, and all of the ways that we perceive things in that material sense have a deeper level of perception available to them that most of the time we live in a world that's so busy and we're always distracted, we're always multitasking, and we're so used to overriding these things. We're so used to saying that they don't matter and just not really paying attention to them. And then when you look into psychic development, there are all of these practices that can be very disembodying. Before even teaching you how to ground or how to find your center or anything like that, you're immediately told, you got to bust open the third eye and you have to, if you want to experience things, you have to have these out-of-body experiences and go into these trances, and that is actually a very dangerous way to begin psychic development. You really don't want to, you can, but you're going to kind of end up having to work backwards. The same goes for those who use plant medicine to kind of awaken these things, is that it's not that it's inherently wrong, but there's a massive risk and a massive possibility that it is going to be very disembodying for you, that it's going to be very difficult to ground and kind of work in a state that isn't this super heightened, intense state all the time. Because what ends up happening is that people who are in a constant state of hypervigilance are actually extremely psychic. And this is because they are paying attention to everything. They are noticing everything. But that doesn't mean that being in that state of overstimulation and activation of the nervous system and hypervigilance is the correct way to take on psychic information. It will be really helpful if we are in an activated state, say because someone is after us, or we're about to get in an accident or something, and in that moment our guides come through, or we get this message that is telling us how to protect ourselves or how to prevent something from happening. That is helpful. But unfortunately, most people just end up in this hypervigilant, overstimulated state, whether or not things are happening. And that's because a lot of people spend every single day in survival mode. And that is really, really taxing, because what ends up happening is that we are burning out the nervous system, and our psychic senses, they are also an extension of the nervous system. They are our higher nervous system. And so when we burn that out, we end up kind of opening ourselves up to things that we maybe don't want to be open to. We become open to the lower astral, open to attacks. And this is why you see so many people that were highly, highly psychic, and they end up becoming ex-psychic or something like that, because they are experiencing all of this attack and they're having all of these terrifying experiences because they were never grounded. They were never working with a set system for cosmology. They weren't even paying attention to like natural law or spiritual science or anything like that. They weren't centering themselves and bringing themselves into the body. Everything was out and up and being in these constant elevated states. And that is just very, very dangerous. We can't sustain that. We can't maintain that over time. So I am going to explain a little bit about psychic somatic experiencing. I'm going to explain what it looks like, because I know it can be kind of like a vague and confusing thing. People are always asking me like, well, what exactly is that? Like, what's exactly happening? And the reason why I gave it that term, and despite the fact that I gave it this term, that does not mean that this is a new thing. I didn't make any of this up. I received it, but I am by no means the first person to receive this. These are practices used in ancient occultism. These are practices used by psychics from centuries ago. And that is because they were very aware that being psychic is a natural state. I mean, every single person has psychic ability. Every single person has the potential to be highly psychic, but we have all kinds of things. We have trauma that gets in the way, or we have, someone's belief system that gets in the way, or someone being, we can have, even though, like I was saying, if you're very overstimulated or hypervigilant, you can be like highly psychic. It can also go the other way, where your nervous system is so ramped up that you actually shut down psychically. You become unable to take anything in, and instead you just feel frozen in that way. So that's also very possible. They did not, for the most part, act out of states like this. Instead, everything was about being very grounded. Everything was about, it was very ritualistic. It was very sacred. It was about reverence. It was about honoring that connection. And part of honoring that connection is understanding that it's an innate part of our humanity. We do not need to leave our humanity to be advanced. We don't need to leave our humanness to be psychic. That is a lie. That is not true. In fact, you don't even need to have out-of-body experiences. You don't need to astral project. You can if you want to, but these things are not, prerequisites for being psychic. In fact, every psychic works very differently. So if those things don't resonate with you, you don't have to do those things. But that being said, I have written down my system over here so that I can share it with you. So as I was saying before, psychic development, what we're doing is we are initially working with the material senses. And what we really want to do is become so mindful, so present, so intentional, and aware of each sense. And I actually really enjoy and love these exercises. And you know when else this is really good? If you have dealt with a lot of trauma in your life and you struggle to meditate, you can use these exercises as a form of meditation. And that is because meditation does not have to be this thing where you are closing your eyes and having, zero thoughts in your head and kind of like transcending everything. It can be, but for some people, especially people who have experienced a lot of trauma, that can be a disembodying experience. I know for me, I can meditate that way now, but it's not my preferred method of meditation. I am kind of always aiming to sink really deep into my body. And so for that, I like to be really engaged with my body. I like to be really engaged, to be having this kind of interactive experience with it. So I guess we can start with sight. So an exercise you can do with sight to kind of expand your awareness and develop that psychic ability. So right now, behind my recording device, I have a blank wall. And if I stare ahead of me at the blank wall, what do I see? I need to be noticing, and this goes for all of the senses. I need to be noticing what do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? What do I taste? So for these exercises, you can be outside if you want, but if you're outside, make sure that you're somewhere where it's not going to be too loud or distracting. It's okay if you're in a park and maybe like one or two people are walking by, or you see some animals moving and whatnot. That's completely fine. But as long as you aren't distracted, it helps for there to not be too much noise. I would not be playing music or anything to these exercises, because what you really want to do is have all other senses kind of fall away so you can really tap into what you are specifically doing. And these exercises that I'm about to teach you are what I teach people when I work with them one-on-one and when I teach psychic somatic development. And they have very positive, I have a kitty with me now. They have very positive experiences with that and really enjoy it. So if I'm staring at the wall in front of me, I see that my walls are tan. So I'm noticing that. As I stare, I see that there are some marks on my wall that I should probably get a magic eraser and clean off. I see that there is some static in front of my vision in front of the wall. I see that there are variations of color depending on where at the wall I look. I see that there is light in the room in front of the wall. So when you're doing these exercises, you're not trying to see anything. You're not trying to have any experience. You are just noticing. This is the very first step. And I am going to expand in future videos. But for now, we are going to be covering the first step, because too many people start at the end and then end up having to backtrack. And that's how it was for me. I had my psychic awareness popped open at a very, very young age. I numbed it with medication for years because I was afraid of it. I didn't know how to handle it. And that only made things worse. And I had to learn how to backtrack too. So, let's move on to, let's say, smell. My cats love when I record. They want to climb up on me and be very involved in this. So smell is something that I have actually had so much success with this exercise, a little too much success, because my clairalience, which is psychic smell, is like through the roof. I actually I've noticed that if you have a very heightened sense of something in particular, then generally it's because you are actually highly psychic in that area. So for me, what happened is that I have always had a very strong sense of smell, to the point where, you know, my family and I, we joke that I'm like a drug dog, that I can sniff anything out, that I, you know, someone can't eat something within like a 24-hour period without me like smelling it on them. I always say that I'm a bloodhound. It's pretty funny. And I ended up developing a fragrance allergy. And through that, I had to cut out all perfumes. And it wasn't even just fragrances. I couldn't be around, like if I was outside and someone walked by and they smelled like cigarette smoke, I would have an allergic response to that and whatnot. So I ended up having to remove all scents from my home, like no perfume, no scented shampoos or conditioners, no laundry detergent, no scented dish soap, like all of this stuff I had to replace. During that time, that was like the most blind that my nose had ever been, because I was so used to smelling so many things all the time. And what I noticed is I would start to smell something. This would particularly happen like if I was on the phone with someone, I would smell their perfume through the phone. Or if I was watching a YouTube video, I could smell someone's breath sometimes if they had bad breath. If I was looking at a photo of someone that's a smoker, I would start smelling cigarette smoke really strongly. And yeah, it's gotten to the point where it's now really intense. So you never know. If you have a very strong inclination to a certain material sense, you very well could be highly psychic in that area too. I find that this is the most common with people that feel a lot. If you are very sensitive emotionally, if you are sensitive to physical pain, if you are sensitive to physical touch, anything like that, you are probably very clairsentient. So moving on to smell. What I do for any exercise involving scent is you usually want to try and think of a scent that you are very familiar with. When I do this exercise, I usually think of a scent that I'm not only familiar with, but one that I also feel safe with, since I can be allergic to a lot of scents. And I find that if it's one that you're very familiar with and have an emotional connection to it or a sentimental connection to it, it actually makes it a lot easier to tune in. So for me, those scents would be like frankincense is a scent that I usually use, or the smell of honey. When I could still wear perfume, I used to wear this vintage Gucci perfume that just smells amazing. And I can imagine that. And so the exercise for that is you want to close your eyes and you want to think of what this smell or what the scent reminds you of. Does it smell warm? Does it smell spicy? Does it smell tangy? Does your nose scrunch up when you smell it? Do your nostrils expand when you smell it? Does the smell make you feel hungry? Does it make you feel happy? You know, you want to try and break down the properties of it. And as you're thinking of that, you want to try and tap into what it smells like. Now, Rudolf Steiner, I want to say that it's in, I think he says this in The Rue Imagination. He actually says that we should be ideally so acquainted with the layers of certain perceptions that alone becomes enough for us. So we can remember the smell of something, or we can remember the taste of something, and that will be enough. We won't feel like we have to eat that chocolate pie at the Christmas party. And that, not to say that you shouldn't, but if you're trying to stay away from it, you won't feel like you need to eat it because you can remember the taste. And remembering the taste will be more than enough. And I actually find that this is really accurate as someone who has a lot of food sensitivities and does have to avoid a lot of foods. Sometimes my wife will be eating something and I'm like, oh, that smells so good. Like, let me smell it. Or I can't have coffee, for example, but I love the smell of coffee. And so when she makes coffee, I'm like inhaling it and practically snorting it because it just smells so good. I'm like, oh, I love that smell. Yeah, and I find that it brings me the same level of joy. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel warm inside. It makes me feel happy. So that's what I do in terms of smell. You just want to try and imagine certain scents. Now, if you're working with the scent, like say you're thinking of, your grandmother's perfume or something, and for whatever reason you can't connect to it, that's completely okay. Just toss it to the side. You can maybe come back to it later and come up with another scent. Maybe try a food that you like and have often or something like that. So let's move on to taste. Now with taste, you want to start off and kind of really sink into yourself. What does your mouth taste like to you now? And really sink into the deepest layer of that you can. Maybe you were drinking some tea with honey and you can still taste that a little bit, or maybe you have a taste that is translated through something that you can smell. I know that happens to me a lot, is if I smell something really strongly, I'll kind of taste it too. Maybe you feel like you don't taste anything, but just try and really tune into the taste, whatever taste is currently in your mouth. Then see if you can change the taste. So it's kind of like scent, where you want to really try and visualize and almost manifest orally the taste of something. So my wife was chewing bubble gum the other day, and go figure, I can't have bubble gum either. And the smell of it, it smelled so good. And later that day, I was like, what brand was that? And she said what brand it was, and I could literally taste it in my mouth, just even thinking about it. So you want to practice kind of manifesting that taste. But with all of these things, you want to just be really in your body, and even with smell, you want to be smelling what's in the room, and what am I currently smelling, and what's behind that smell? What colors do the smell, what colors does the smell look like to me? What sounds does the smell remind me of? And most of these things, they're pretty interchangeable. So the same goes for sound. So right now, if I'm completely silent, I hear some sort of tapping coming from my upstairs neighbors. I hear my heater going. I can hear my air purifier. I hope these sounds aren't too disruptive in the background of my video. And I hear, when I listen past those sounds, I hear a ringing. Specifically a ringing in my left ear, and it's a very, very high pitch, not like a tinnitus ringing, more like the ringing that you might hear when you have higher forces around you. That's something that I experience a lot when I'm not alone. So yeah, that's something you can do. Now, if you want to work with, it's a little bit more complicated when working with touch or feeling. So to develop clairsentience, you need to become extremely familiar with your body. I say this as someone who is very clairsentient to the point where it was unbearable for me. I did not want to be psychic anymore. I did not want to be spiritual anymore. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't be around other people without feeling their attachments, without feeling their pain. And it's hard, but what I learned is that I had to become very aware and acquainted with my own body. There are some different ways that you can do this. So One exercise is, and sometimes these exercises, especially somatic exercises in general, can seem really silly. They can seem really corny and really small. But at its core, life is simple. At its core, people are simple. And these exercises that seem so simple, when we actually do them and we do them regularly, they can make massive changes for us. So one exercise you can do, and clairsentience I break up into touch versus feeling. And this is because you can have both of those with clairsentience, but you can also be more attuned to one thing than the other, and that's completely okay. So if you want to become very familiar with your own body, say you are about to go to a get together or something like that, you want to kind of start by just touching your hand. You can pat yourself. You can run your hand up your arms. This is actually when we touch ourselves in this way, it's called self-havening in the somatic world. And it's kind of like letting our body know you're safe, you're not alone, I'm right here. And there's something really miraculous about the body, which is that the body responds to verbal cues, and it responds to physical cues. So if you are saying out loud to your body, you are safe, there are no present threats. I'm looking around, there's not a bear behind me, there's not a lion about to attack, there's not a caveman that's going to come wrestle my dinner out of my hands. And the reason why I use those examples is because our bodies, they're very primal. We have the programming of our ancestors. So if they had to run and hide from bears and tigers, you better believe that programming is going to be in your nervous system. So we have to establish safety. And when we say things like that out loud, you may not feel better immediately in the moment, but what happens is it starts this practice of down regulating. And that kind of goes the other way too. I also feel the need to mention when we are complaining out loud, when we are speaking negatively about ourselves out loud, when we are saying out loud things like, I don't feel safe, I feel like something's wrong, all of this stuff, our body is going to activate and respond to those cues. So that's really important to also pay attention to. And that doesn't mean that we can't communicate things. Actually, writing, if you want to write down, I don't feel safe, or I feel very threatened, or and any of those things, expressive writing has actually been shown to heal sickness and disease and reduce that overall activation. So there are ways around it, but the body responds to verbal cues, and like I was saying, it responds to these physical cues. So if we want to be connected to the body, we need to talk to the body. We need to physically touch and connect to the body. And this helps the most. If you can touch your own hands, you can touch your face. I don't really like to touch my face that much. I don't find it comforting. I generally go for my arms. I find that, like a self hug always feels good. You can touch your knees or the bottom of your feet. Something that doesn't usually get a lot of touch can sometimes have a more potent effect. Because then you are bringing your attention and awareness to that part of the body, which brings me into my next point. Another way to feel safe within the body is called resourcing. So clairsentiently, if you are picking up on some stuff that is really overwhelming and really stressful, and say you are feeling it in your chest, and in your chest you feel heavy, maybe you feel a tightness, maybe it feels like the walls of your rib cage are closing around your lungs, and that can be a really terrible feeling. Something you can do is close your eyes and scan the body, and you want to look for a part of your body that feels relaxed, a part of your body that is not in that activated state. Sometimes you might say, okay, well, my right leg feels pretty good right now. But sometimes most of your body may feel really activated, and you will have to get creative and say, well, you know, my belly button feels fine, or my like my middle toe on my left foot, or you know what I mean? And you want to do your best to kind of bring your awareness into that. So that is essentially what you want to do for touch. When you bring your awareness into that, you want to make sure, like, okay, I'm now touching my belly button. I am consciously bringing myself into that place. Or, you know, I'm touching my right knee because my right knee feels the safest in my body out of everywhere else right now, or wherever it is, and kind of use that touch to bring yourself back. Another thing you can do is put your hands over your heart. That always feels really good to me. You can put your hands over your solar plexus. That's another thing that feels good. You can rub the back of your head. If you know, so we can feel unsafe based on the fact that the backs of our heads, or our backs in general, or just the entire backside of us is exposed. This is why if you wrap a blanket around you, or put on like a hoodie with a hood or something like that, it kind of gives the illusion of that safety. And so that is also part of it. So unlike what I was saying with the other exercises, when we're talking about clairsentience, there is a more active approach, and that is just because generally the sensations that come along with it can be a little bit more negative. I mean, you can still have like a negative experience with something like clairalience, for example, psychic smell. You can smell something that smells like death, or the smell of something burning, or, you know, it can be unpleasant, but it's not quite the same. It's not quite as invasive, I guess I should say. So yeah, with clairsentience, we want to be a little bit more intense. And then the second part of that being feeling. Now, this is where we just go directly into the somatic experiencing, where you are closing your eyes, you're doing body scans, and you're feeling into the different sensations in your body. And this is actually how we can begin to see what is ours and what is not ours. And I'll give an example. Just a broad example. I used to never be able to tell the difference between my own physical pain and someone else's physical pain, my own emotions and someone else's emotions, the state of my nervous system versus the state of someone else's nervous system. Anytime I was around someone, I just took it on like a jacket, a straight jacket sometimes. And it was really, really intense. And so now because I am, you know, grounded enough in my body, and I know what my energy feels like, I know what I feel like, and I know what someone else feels like. I may be, you know, watching a movie with my wife or something, and I'll be playing with her hair, and I start to get a headache. But I notice, because I'm very in tune with my body, I notice that the headache is a feeling that has traveled from my hand that is playing with my wife's hair, and it's kind of come up and become this cloud over my head. And I realize that I technically don't have a headache. I'm tuning into her headache. And then I'm able to say, like, are you okay right now? I can feel that you have a headache. And she's like, yeah. And then I'm like, well, do you want a head massage? Because I can separate what I am from what she is. I can feel exactly where the headache is. So when we can separate ourselves, when we are so in tune with who we are and what we are, we can actually be so much more helpful to other people, because then we can feel the difference, and it creates that space. And so I can say, well, I can feel that you're feeling this throbbing on the right side in the back of your head, and this is what it feels like. Do you want me to massage that area? You know what I mean? It can be really helpful. And along with the feeling, you want to also be very aware of your emotional life in general. We always want to allow our emotions to fully play out, but the way that they play out is through the body. The way that they play out is through these sensations. So we need to let, no matter how overwhelming it is, we need to let these sensations of overwhelm, it might feel like water rising. It might feel a little disembodied. It might feel really scary. But if you feel safe enough and if you feel comfortable enough, what we need to do is just observe. Just observe the sensations as they come up. Not trying to fix them, not trying to change them. And trust me, I know that that's very hard because I have had to do this through some emotional states that were so intense, it just didn't even feel doable. It didn't even feel possible. And we can take breaks. There's a point where if we force ourselves to do that when we aren't ready, we can actually create more damage. So you want to pay attention to whether or not you are able to be grounded in that state. But when we do that and we allow these sensations to fully play themselves out, we're not going to be all mucked up by them. Because here's what ends up happening. When we don't deal with that stuff, we can't, like I said, we can't separate what's ours and what's someone else's because there is so much going on. So it's like if you have a backpack, say it's like a survival backpack, and what you need to have in there is clean food and clean water, maybe a jacket for if it gets cold, maybe a flashlight, stuff like that. These are your resources, your emotional resources. But if you're taking on everybody else's stuff and you only have so much room in that backpack, what do you think's gonna happen? You're gonna end up taking on someone's like moldy, rotten food, their dirty water, all of this stuff. And then you're gonna be digging through your backpack of emergency emotional resources, and there's nothing in there that you can use because you have all of this other crap in there that isn't yours and you don't need it. It is so important to be aware so that we can get rid of that stuff. And sometimes you won't even be lucky enough to find dirty water and moldy food. Sometimes it's just bricks, just piles of bricks taking up your entire backpack and weighing you down for God knows how long. So we need to do these practices. And ideally, I genuinely believe that everyone should be doing these practices every day. It takes a few minutes, because we should not be entering into these psychic states when we can't even enter into our own bodies, when we can't even connect with our humanity. If we're just trying to escape it all the time, that is not going to get us anywhere. We can't outrun it. We may run around the block, but we're going to come back and we are in the exact same body on the same planet. So we need to work with what we have, because the human body is the spiritual experience. And I'm going to hopefully soon make a video going more in depth into this, because there is a lot of occult knowledge that I really want to talk about in regards to the body, the nervous system, the vagus nerve, and what these things mean psychically, why they mean what they mean psychically, how we can tap into that stuff, because it's really important. So I also want to talk about cognition, cognition as the material sense perception for claircognizance. We need to be mindful and observant of our thoughts. We cannot let them run rampant. I love examples, so I'm going to give an example. When you know what thoughts you have and what thoughts are outside thoughts, that is truly the only way that you can operate ethically as a psychic. This is why we see so many people acting as psychics, and they are just hearing anything and they don't care about where it comes from. They're just like, oh, sounds good to me. And then they go and tell someone. Whole time they're hearing from like a lower astral entity or someone's massive desire egregore that they have built up with their own lust for something to the point where it's conscious and acting on its own. Things that are straight up demonic, and they are passing this information on, and it's harming people. it's harming people. Or in the case of the example that I'm about to give, they tap into something telepathically that someone else who has a bad intention is just sending them. So I had an experience maybe 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, and maybe 2 years ago, where all of a sudden, telepathically, this thought came into my head. The thought was that someone who was an acquaintance of someone that me and one of my close friends knew was the soulmate of my close friend. Something felt very off about it and very wrong about it. You know, this was not my own opinion. I didn't have anything against this person at the time. And I'm just thinking, where did this come from? So I responded and I'm like, who are you? What is this? You know, you got to ask questions. And immediately it was gone. And I felt really weird about it. So I did not tell my friend. I told my wife and I wrote it down and that's it. Well, it turns out this person was obsessed with my friend. And this person also sent that exact same message to someone else and to my friend telepathically, trying to manipulate the situation, trying to mask as, you know, I'm one of your guides. And no, this is a manipulative person who was highly telepathic and was just saying that stuff. We have to know exactly who we are and what we think. We have to know what kind of thoughts come in and out of our minds so that, and we also have to, you know, because if we do that, then we can differentiate between, okay, these thoughts are mine and this is the frequency of my thoughts. These thoughts are inspired by my guides. That this is the frequency of those thoughts. So we get two separate categories going right now. These thoughts are kind of extra things that come in, not really sure what they are. That's the frequency of these. And then over here, these thoughts are weird, intrusive, lower astral thoughts that do not serve me in any way. You know, they're manipulative, whatever it may be. And this is the frequency of those thoughts. If we don't even know where our thoughts begin and other thoughts end, how can we ever differentiate? How can we ever develop our claircognizance? So that's the first exercise for claircognizance is you need to notice, you need to observe, you need to become acquainted with. And the second exercise for claircognizance is you need to write it down or state it out loud. This is something that a lot of people that I've worked with have seen a lot of success with. If you have this seemingly random, you know, not a big deal thought come into your head, maybe it's from you, maybe you feel like it's from your guides, it may mean something later on. There may be a reason why it's coming in. And I'm not talking about, you know, any thoughts like you're thinking, oh, I kind of want popcorn today or whatever it may be. I'm talking about you are doing the laundry, you know, totally invested in what you're doing. And all of a sudden you have a thought of, I feel like so-and-so is going to have a baby. You know what I mean? Like something just totally out of left field. Pay attention to that. Write it down. Say it to someone, maybe not that person, but say it to someone. And that is what is going to build up your relationship with yourself and with your claircognizance, because soon you'll start to realize through validation from other people that some things are coming true, some things are happening. And that's how we experience that somatically, is we are tuning in to ourselves on a level where there is such a deep awareness, such a deep presence, such a deep mindfulness. When I was in therapy years ago, the first time that my therapist ever asked me, you know, the emotion that you're talking about now, where are you feeling it in your body and what are you feeling? And I I had no idea what that meant. I could not access my body. I was in such a dissociated and fragmented state that was absolutely foreign to me. The idea that there were physical sensations that coupled with emotional sensations and that I could somehow tap into those and know where they were, that was crazy to me. But I was eventually able to learn and understand that sensations aren't always just something that's like emotional and a cloud over a certain body part, but it's also pain, it's also tension, feelings of tightness or strain. And tuning into those feelings, that's when I realized that my physical body was making up for so much, especially psychically. My physical body was taking on so much from other people. And because I didn't know what was mine and what wasn't mine, I was walking around carrying that. I was walking around with a whole lot of bricks all the time. And then what happens? The body becomes burdened. You become exhausted. You can't actually develop. You may still be picking up on certain things, but you're in survival mode. You're in pain. There's strain. That's not how it's supposed to be. Now, that doesn't mean that if that's your experience, you're not still highly psychic. Of course you are. But is that how you want your psychic experience to be? Probably not. So, in all of these things, we need to rebuild that connection with the physical body. We need to understand that the nervous system and the material senses are the key to higher perception. They are the key to our psychic awareness. When we detach ourselves from those things, we detach ourselves from psychic clarity. We detach ourselves from truth. We detach ourselves from safety. We can only develop and become clear if we have discernment. And we can only discern if we are in the body. We can only develop and become clear if we have protection. And we can only have psychic protection if we are grounded in the body. It all comes back to the body. It all comes back to this system that was birthed out of the cosmos. This wasn't an accident. Everything that we experience physiologically is the key. Everything that we experience in the body has a message. If you have a migraine, you are being told something. There is some message coming through, whether it is that your coworker's perfume is too strong, the lights, shining at you are dysregulating to you. You need to switch to incandescent bulbs, or maybe you have a migraine because you're picking up on someone else's. Maybe you have a migraine because you're overloaded with claircognizance. There are so many layers to this. And we can't release pain. We can't release tension. We can't release anxiety. We can't release fear until we release these prejudices that we have against our own body. We need to become aware. We need to become present. That is psychic somatic experiencing. Psychic somatics is psychic development through somatic awareness. And that's all psychic development. If you genuinely want to develop as a psychic, I'm going to say it again, the body is the key. The body is the answer. And I'm really excited to go more in depth with this in the future. If you enjoyed this, please let me know. If you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you so much for being here with me. Maybe like the video or comment if you feel like it. And yeah, I appreciate you so much. Thank you.